Okay, so impending doom.
Ah, yes.
The end is nigh.
Mm-hmm.
The year is 2023.
Okay.
Place is America,
Okay.
New America, as I like to call it.
Okay.
So what's going on, Sal?
Uh, well, the position of the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency of the world economy is, I would say it's gone already, but it's if it isn't gone yet, then it's definitely getting there. It's breathing its last breath.
It is.
Our political system is at an all-time low in terms of like popular legitimacy. You know, I was looking at statistics a while back for a thing I was writing, and in like the 70s and 80s, they you know, because they've been doing polls about like, oh, do you support the government generally? Since, you know,
Do you believe in the
yeah, do you generally support the government? Do you generally agree with the government? And then back in the 80s and you know, even up into the 90s, the 90s is where it really starts to go down, but it's been on a general decline. But like 70s and 80s, it was like 86% of the population was like, yeah, you know, generally I support and agree with our government. And this is post Vietnam. This is post like some of the biggest like spits in the face of like the act of the government towards the people.
Much more egregious than a lot of the things we've experienced nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. At least like, you know, yeah, egregious.
More directly like, egregious.
Yes. But you know, you compare that to today's numbers, and it's below 50%. You know, half of the population doesn't vote. You know, it's
like this decline in nationalism has almost mirrored the incline in like postmodern thought.
Yeah.
That's where I think a lot of this kind of, not that the actual economic strife is coming from that direction, but like the lack of willingness to try to combat it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in one way, we're being sold this nationalist idea that we can't fail, but in the other way, like there's a common, like I like to call this like the generation of apathy. Like,
yeah,
no one really cares, and they also think it's a virtue to hate your government. Like there's people think that think an economics class is going to happen and it's necessary, then there's people that just want to see everything burn. Like I think that's honestly like a common sentiment in the United States,
or just not caring if like not even a desire. There is the desire, like especially from like the far left.
Yeah,
there's the desire to just see like this widespread chaos, you know. But there's also the more moderate left. There's this just apathy. Well, if it all comes crumbling down, that's what we get, you know. It's
what am I going to do about it?
Yeah, exactly.
I like to tell people when they say that, I hear that a lot, especially from younger people. Well, what can I do about it? Like, why should I even care? I can't affect it. And I always say, like, that is why we're in the position we're in. Exactly. That thought in itself is why, because no one has done anything.
Yeah.
And they've allowed this to just continue happening. Because when you have multiple generations of what can I do about it, nothing gets done about it.
And you think about like the like Gen X, the you know, kind of the 80s, late 80s, 90s generation. That was like the definitive characteristic.
The true flower children.
Yeah, just like, you know, the definitive, you know, art form of theirs was a kind of like slack. They call it slacker culture. It was just like, you know, drop out, do, you know, and what difference does it make what you do, you know?
Almost like an acceptance that things are just going to be shitty.
And yeah, just shoot up in the corner. You'll feel better.
And I think that comes from like not having any sort of like unifying ideas as a country.
Yeah.
Like yes, there's always going to be things we don't agree on, but we don't even agree on the fact that we want our country to succeed anymore. And they don't even know, like a lot of people don't even know why you should want your country to succeed. Like they think that we are separate from the nation which we live in.
One of my wife's great grandpa, we were just up there. He was an old union guy, so we talked politics.
Of course.
Yeah, it was fun. But he was talking about like how, you know, because he's an old Democrat, which means something very, and he acknowledged like that, you know, he's
like more of a classical liberal.
Yeah, he supports the Republican Party now. He you know, but in like, you know, the 60s, he was a Democrat. You know, he said that the only politician he ever actually worked for was JFK. So that was his, you know, that's his MO. But he was like, you know, I didn't always vote just straight, you know, the vote blue no matter who idea. Like he was like, there were some people who I recognized would be better for me in terms of like, because again, he was a union guy. That he was like, there are some politicians that, yeah, if his words were, if I vote for them and they get in, it'll be better for the union, but it'll be worse for the country. That's what he was trying to get at. He was like, you need a country, you need a unified,
like that old school pragmatism over ideology,
where it's like, yes, this person might agree with me more, this person might even benefit me more, but if he's going to be detrimental to the whole, then it's for naught. And you're right, we don't have that sense of like connectedness, that cohesion.
And that sentiment's even lost on the right. Like if you look on the right nowadays, like we see so many times where conservatives will not like the conservative candidate for a presidential or even like a Senate election, and therefore will not vote. When realizing, like, you have to realize that, like, even if like you don't support the Republican candidate as well, like you're losing elections and you're losing the battle on a lot of the fronts that we care about as conservatives, you know? Like a lot of people didn't vote for Trump last time just because they didn't like him personally. But you're a conservative, and like, say you feel a certain way about, I mean, gun rights, you know?
Like how often do you hear conservatives be like, well, yeah, politically he was fine, but he just was a bad figurehead. He was a bad face for the country. He was, you know, rude, brash,
what does
whatever.
That matter?
Exactly.
Like if it's going to benefit you and your family and put more money in your pocket and keep us from the brink of literal economic collapse.
Exactly.
Which is, I mean, what was happening? Like, there's no one that can argue that the economy was not doing well. Like we had almost 0% joblessness, like which I don't know, that's a new word that's come about, unemployment and joblessness. But that's what they say. But if you look at the statistics, I mean, employment rates are increasing. We were bringing money. We were like, a lot of these like what is it, Midwestern states were becoming more industrial, which I think is really one of the main issues now that we touch on that, is that, I mean, not only is our dollar becoming worthless, we have no value in this country. Like,
because the reason our dollar is becoming worthless is because of that. There's
nothing to base it on.
There's nothing, like, the U.S. dollar isn't a congealed form of like an industrial product where it's like, this has value because it represents an exchange rate in a prosperous economy.
Yeah,
it's basically the only thing holding the U.S. dollar afloat is our military.
That's a horrible situation to be
in. A slippery slope when it comes to, like, you know, we pulled out of Afghanistan. That was one of the biggest L's the United States military has faced since probably Vietnam.
Yeah,
is having to just give that up after 20 years, I think, of being in Afghanistan. We just left, and the people we were fighting took over the country in a week. And that's, you know, that's. I don't want to, you know, go either way in terms of if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but
it is a sign to other countries that,
it's a sign that this is, you know, Mao said, you know, this is a paper tiger. It looks intimidating. It looks scary, but when the wind and the rain comes, it's gone. You know, it's going to just dissolve.
Because there's nothing holding it together. Like originally, like in the United States, and we talked to our grandparents and great-grandparents, and even our parents still remember this a little bit, there was always that idea of, even if I disagree with you, we're American. It's still better for me to do what's best for, like, my fellow Americans. And, like, if there's nothing that keeps people together in a country, there is no country. Like, we're a nation. Like, that's the separate. Like, we have our state.
Yeah.
But there's the nation of America, and I hate to get super religious right off the bat, but I mean, that was one of the things that held people together. Like, this idea that people can come to the United States and not homogenize in any way is not it doesn't fruit anything, you know? Like,
it's also not realistic. Like, no other nation works, no other, like, civilization works like that. If you move to China, you can't just stay an American. You have to, either you're going to be a social outcast or you're going to become Chinese.
And that's not xenophobic.
No.
That's nationalistic, and there should be a certain sense of nationalism. Like, if you're coming here, it's for a reason.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be coming to the United States to still live in India, the United States. You know what I mean? You stay in India. Like, you come here for what we have, so accept what we have and be a part of it. And I feel like even Americans, like American-born Americans, want to be so not American. Like, they're even afraid to say they're American. Like,
we're a country of those guys who show up to the party and stand in the corner because they think they're better than everybody.
And it's like, you're not. You're just you're not contributing to anything. And so therefore, like, when I hear these thoughts, I don't have any sympathy for these people.
No.
Because I'm like, you're not helping. You're not, like, you're like, we're all paddling the lifeboat away from that Titanic, and you're just sitting there, like, you know what I mean, complaining that the Titanic is going down, and it's like, yes, obviously it's
happening.
happening.
In the fucking lifeboat
and do something about it,
you know.
But I think we're getting to the point where,
well, to talk about, like, you were mentioning, like, a kind of just a general sense of like we're all in this together, like we're all on the lifeboat.
Yeah.
We're
whether you like it or not.
Yeah, that that idea has gone so far like the opposite direction, where you have people on both sides of the political spectrum. I don't want to make it just like the left is doing this. I think the left is doing it far more frequently, but both sides of the political spectrum justifying, violence against people, total disregard of like a contrary opinion. It's becoming very polarized. I mean, and I say it's becoming, but since 2016, leading up to 2016 with Trump, we have had the most like polarized, like steadfast ideologues in this country that I've probably.
But the ideology is one of deconstruction. Like, it's an ideology that if you ask a lot of these, and I mean, we are referring to mostly far left-leaning people in this country, who, whether they be a smaller, like a minority comparative to the population, they do hold a lot of the power in this country. And when they're deconstructing values, but not putting anything in place either. Like, if you ask them what they actually believe in and what they want the country to look like, they can't tell you. They just want to destroy what is happening now. And that's almost like with the idea of them wanting economic collapse. It's like, yes, there are people who want to change the system, and then there's people who just want to destroy the system.
Yeah.
And like are going to allow it to happen. And like I don't know who could honestly think that's a good idea. Like, it's almost a lie that the younger generation has been sold.
Well, the only people that I think it is a lie that people have been sold and people have just latched onto because it sounds, you recognize like ills in your society, and you think like, well, this society has problems, that gradually transforms into just a negative view. Like, this society is bad, it's racist, it's homophobic, it's xenophobic, whatever. You apply all these like negative, which have, there are definitely legitimate criticisms to be made, especially when you look at political actors, but you apply that, you go from, oh, there's some things wrong with this, oh, this thing is bad, to we have to destroy this generally. And
the entire thing, which,
and you mentioned like who would even like genuinely think that that's a good idea, and the only people that could possibly benefit from this are people that the cohesion of the United States is a threat to. There's a reason. Like, one of the things I always come back to is, people talk about like offshoring jobs and sending factories, sending our industrial production to foreign countries, but I don't see very many people talking about why that had to happen. And the reason that had to happen, I mean, you obviously get kind of a surface level, well, because, you could pay people less in foreign countries. They didn't have labor rights. Why didn't they have labor rights in other countries? Why did we have labor rights in this country? Because we were together, we were a unified force for long enough that unification, that sense of community, led to the development of, institutions to protect the average people. You had like I mentioned, my great-grandfather, you have a massive labor movement in this country. Unions used to be a big political factor. And the downfall of like unions' power in like politics comes with the offshoring, because they recognize that if it keeps going the same way, if we keep all of our industrial output like internal, if all of our money is going internally and benefiting the country itself, this united whole, then eventually there's going to be more and more surrenders. We already had to stop, letting children work in the factories. Then eventually,
the work week was shortened.
Yeah, you have to shorten work hour. You can't work someone 15 hours a day. And then more and more and more and more and more until like, hypothetically,
it's actually a good place to
work until oh, we're working 4 hours a day and everybody gets paid enough to
and
live.
We're producing enough.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like I feel like the union system only works if the only people that can work these industries are in the country. Like, because that's the idea, is like, you can't strike if we can just move your job to another country.
Exactly.
If you have to stay in the United States, that's the only way people can strike, because then you have no other option.
And if your entire economy is based off of these like minimal effort service jobs that anybody can do with like a day of training, then you're not working in a factory where you have to know the whole system. You have to work there for years. You have people who have worked there for decades.
It can't run without them.
Who if they leave, your factory is not going to function. McDonald's, you strike at McDonald's and they're just gonna, close down for a week and hire an entire new staff. They're getting to a point. I don't know where it was, but did you see that they built a fully automated McDonald's?
Yes.
That's more evidence to like this.
And we see
your
this
job
idea
is
in the
pointless.
left. We see this idea where they're like, we need to plan for people to not have jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the goal, is to just not bring industry or jobs back, but just like eliminate. Like, I don't understand, like that makes sense in a society where we have production, and maybe we can automate production, but we have no production to automate.
Or even like
so
a society where we have these like manual jobs, these manual labor jobs that you need people for, and you automate the more superfluous stuff. You have the fucking automated Starbucks, you have the fucking automated McDonald's. Then nobody's losing out.
Yeah,
it's just
still something else to do.
Yeah, and you're still providing something. You're still actively engaged in the production. And then, I mean, as more and more stuff, automation, that's one of the things that bothers me about the left and the right, is this fear of automation. Automation in a functioning society should make everybody's life easier. It's insane that we live in a society where automation is a threat to livelihood rather than, oh, thank God, we don't have to do that stupid shit anymore.
Now we can focus on what matters.
Yeah, now we can all redirect our powers towards something that matters.
And when that's been exported, what are you left with?
Nothing. You automate, and then that's part of the whole, like, the first politician I ever heard in America to bring up universal basic income was that Andrew Yang guy.
Yeah. And Yang Gang. What a name.
Oh my God.
What a slogan.
That was so fucking cringe.
The only one that was worse was love Trump's hate was Hillary's, and it just sounds like it's a pro-Trump like slogan. Love Trump's hate.
Will do.
It's like that. And like this, like we could have a whole podcast on just that. But anyways,
but the UBI thing, it's like, so you want to incentivize people, not to mention, just realistically it wouldn't work, because you give everybody a universal basic income in this kind of society, and what prices are it's just gonna fuck inflation over. You're just gonna
and people are literally just gonna not do anything. Like,
that'll be how it is for like 2 months, and then everybody will be like, oh, so we can, let's say you get $2,000 a month. Okay, so your landlord's gonna be like, okay, so I'm gonna charge $2,000 plus whatever you were originally paying for rent. So now nothing's happened. Now you're just back to where you were. That $2,000 is worthless now.
Especially when you have a fiat currency where you could just then raise. You can just print money, so then the money, the $2,000 that you've given everybody, you basically probably printed it, so it's fake. So you've now given everyone $2,000, but you devalued the currency to where people are going to be just as poor. Like, that's how it works. You just raise the price of everything else.
And that's becoming a more common position among Democrats, is like an idea of a universal basic income, something that's...
But of printed money.
Yeah. Something that's just on face value, if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, it's like, well, that's dumb. But it's being promoted. People are being incentivized to work, like, our employment rates are down. People are being incentivized to work less, especially since COVID.
Yeah.
People don't want to work because they recognize that they can make more money not working than they can working a job. I mean,
we incentivize, like, I think I told you this one, it's like the incentivization of mediocrity.
Yeah.
It's like how we incentivize mothers to be single. Like, literally in our like social safety net are so many things that de-incentivize marriage, de-incentivize families, de-incentivize work.
If you're a single mother, you get way more benefits than a married couple having a kid.
That could make like less overall, or the same amount of money as that single mother. You know what I mean? As more people, it's asinine. Like, I think honestly we should be paying people to have kids and get married. Like, nothing benefits society more than a well-raised family. Like, and I think, I don't know, we don't need to get on that right now.
There was a law, or they were trying to push something through in Texas where, like, you get like extra tax breaks if you were a married couple with a kid, and like for every kid you would have more tax breaks. And you know what the left was doing?
What?
The left was accusing this law and the lawmakers behind it of being white supremacists. They were like doing the whole like, oh, they want there to be more white babies thing, and it's like, there's nothing in the law that specifies like race. It just, you have to be married.
I love this. I love all these ideas of like institutional racism, and like there's no law. Yes, there is cultural racism. That's a thing that has always persisted, but we have basically effectively eliminated racism from legislation.
Biden said the other day that the biggest threat to our country is white supremacy. I'm like where?
What are you? I mean, I know he's demented, but still, like, I mean, you can't you're the leader of the free world, dude. Like, every other country in the world laughs at that statement, like,
because it's so patently false.
And it's really, And it is a bait and switch. I mean, and that's the classic move of the left in the United States, is to take away from the classist argument and move it towards a racist argument.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and we've been
that's been since literally the dawn of this
pre-Civil War. Yeah, like the South, like the whole idea was like, you guys don't realize that you're fighting like for the upper class.
Yeah,
like the people fighting didn't own anything.
You're sending your sons
slaves.
And daughters to die for the sake of some guy not having to work.
It was literally, by the end of the war, anyone who owned slaves didn't have to fight. So literally the only people fighting for slavery were the people who didn't own slaves. And they're sold that lie, you know, like, and that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we want to get real deep and real schizo, I mean, that those white slave owners are basically the Democratic Party nowadays, and no one
they
wants
were
to
the
admit
Democratic
that.
Party then.
Yeah, no one wants to admit that. No one wants to admit that. Like, I mean, people want to talk about the Republican Party as the white racist party, and the Republican Party was the party, I mean, that
abolished slavery.
Quite literally. Like,
and you can talk about the only thing that, like, I hate the whole party switch thing, because the only like significant switch that occurred between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party was that FDR in his social programs made more black people vote for the Democrat. Like, it won the black vote. And I mean, that's not a switch, you know. That's it's a shift, sure, but it's not like, oh, I hate the term party switch, where it's like, oh, suddenly they just like flipped, and it was the other way around. Because
because the values, like the idea of abolishing slavery to them was not like the modern Democratic ideas of like the things they do for black voters is to get the vote. Like the Republican thing was that like Judeo-Christian, like man is man, it was equal under God's image,
and it was like a constitutional Republican idea of like, we are all people. You have to, like, the Constitution doesn't work if you have these exceptions. Yes. And it wasn't a system. It wasn't like an idea of like, oh, we need to give more to these people because they have suffered, like a equity versus equality type thing. It was, no, the Constitution says all men created equal. These are men. They're equal to us. They should be respected by law and by governance in the same way. You set a precedence that one group of people is not people, and then any group of people can become not people. And then you look at the modern Republican Party now, and that's their MO. I mean, I think they go about it. I cannot like you. Like, are there Republican senators that don't like black people? Probably, but will they fight for that person's rights? Yes. Yeah, and that's their whole idea is the Constitution is set up. It's the founding document of this country, and it says what the government can and can't do. That's what we're going off of. It's and literally, like the Constitution is a conservative document. Yeah, it's to conserve liberty, and that should, I think, be where conservatives, like, there's a lot of things conservatives might disagree on, but the Constitution is not one. No, like, that's just, if we can't agree on that, then there's no country. Yeah, like, that's it. Like, it's one of the unifying factors. It's it's one of the things that makes this country legit. I mean, it is literally like the founding document. So without it, there's no legitimacy for the country, and then you have like the left, especially, putting limits on, freedom of speech. The Second Amendment is the obvious one, because they're fucking right up open about it. Like, yeah, we want to take away your guns. First Amendment, freedom of speech is being, threatened by, if not legislatively, which you could certainly argue, it's more of a fourth branch tactic. Yeah, it's just like a cultural shift where it's like, maybe under law you're allowed to say, and that's not true either with hate speech laws, and even the FBI literally working in like these large social media platforms, which are influencing thought, and like, I don't care if they influence thought, but it shouldn't be influenced by the government. And even our Fourth Amendment rights. I mean, if we look at, you look at the of course I'm not remembering it right now. The act after 9/11, the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act, and the new one, the Restrict Act, which is like, at least the Patriot Act, they were like, it sounds nice. Yeah, it sounds like if you don't know anything about it, you're like, the Patriot Act. I'm a patriot. Yeah, but the Restrict Act, and like it's giving you, man, like unconstitutional rights to like search and seizure. Like, I mean, they want to be able to debank people for like, the phraseology is so fucked in it, because it's like participating in speech that furthers the interests of foreign countries. So it's like, you're telling me that You know, a lady, I think it was in the UK, or it was either in the UK or Canada. A lady got fucking debanked. She got her bank account cut off because she paid her I think it was a dog groomer company. It was called like Ira's Grooming, but you know the like automated system that picks up, you know, that tracks all of these transactions.
I thought she was paying the IRA.
No, that could have been it too, but she thought they thought it was a payment to Iran.
Just to the country.
Yeah, just to the, you know.
I just sent Iran $80.
No, it was an insurance. It was Ira's insurance because it was pet insurance. And so it's the automated system thought it was Iran insurance, which first off doesn't make any sense. But you know, so people are getting debanked for just like interacting with an Iranian, like
you're not breaking a law. Like that's asinine.
And then like, you know, on top of that, you know, so if you go on social media now and you say like, you know, oh, I don't think we should be threatening nuclear war with China. I don't think we should be provoking Russia. I don't think we should be, you know, you're furthering those countries' interests. You might also be furthering what you perceive as like the interest of the world and the American people, but you are furthering their interests. So how, you know, you draw this very blurry line where it's like, so can I get my bank account shut down now for saying like,
well, and blurry lines move very easily.
Yeah.
Like because you can't find them. Like it's, and that's what I think people don't realize is sometimes, yes, there's going to be speech we don't like. There's going to be things that happen with guns, but these are immutable constitutional amendments for a reason because you cannot back off any on them or it's a slippery slope and you lose the entire thing.
Exactly. And that's the problem with the Second Amendment thing. Like I said, that's the most open form of this, where it's like if you, and I was talking to my dad about this the other day because he's like, you know, he's a liberal. But if you poke a hole in the Second Amendment, then how much, you know, it's hard to break the whole thing. You know, you can't just say like, all right, we're
slowly pick away at it.
But yeah, if you pick away at one part, it's easier to pick away at the second part. It's easier to pick away at more and more and more until it's just nothing. You have no guarantee that the government won't. I mean, you don't have that guarantee now. You know, but at least you have the theoretical, like, judicial guarantee. You have it's on paper.
It is,
you know,
still, right now.
But if you know, that's when you get, we talked about fascism in the last episode. That's when you get the transformation from like a fucked up democracy to outright fascism. Is at least like theoretically we have these constitutions. We have a constitutional republic in this country. What if you get rid of that constitution, then you don't. You don't have that basis. It's an open dictatorship.
And I think that is when the Second Amendment has to come into play.
Yes. We are supposed to be talking about collapse.
So I think this kind of ties in though. Like so like, people don't realize that, well, the Constitution is something that I think will be there even if the collapse of the entire American government. Like it's still a defining document that I feel like is almost separate in a way. Like it's almost like a set of commandments. Because I mean, they're basically like common sense for the most part. You know what I mean? I feel like those ideas should be in any like good government.
I do have to disagree.
Where do you disagree?
Because I think that given a collapse of political legitimacy in this country, some new, like let's you know,
there will be new constitutions.
We're going into a hypothetical here, but let's say, you know, popular legitimacy for the existing American state just withers away completely. You have to form something new out of that.
Yeah,
and I think almost certainly there will be, you know, an influence of these prior established conventions. You know, these prior
it'll be a new
Constitution itself, but a new founding document will have to be.
I agree.
You know,
I just think that a lot of the ideas, even if it's not the same document, these ideas are rooted in just literally they're God-given rights. Like they're just these immutable rights that in whatever way they flesh out, they should be similar. And like and that's why I think like things are collapsing and things might need to collapse because those things that made us great are gone and they are being chipped away at.
Yeah.
And I think that people need to get ready for something. I don't know, like no one can say what's going to happen. Even after the 30s, like we still bounce back. But
you could say that was a collapse. You know,
that was a collapse.
Like, and that's where I think that.
But that was a global collapse. That's why I think it's different. This is almost going to be just a polar collapse of like the American empire.
Yeah.
Like even then, we still had control in the world in a way. Like we were still like even though we were poor,
well, we were capable.
we were strong in the we had industry.
Yeah.
People still lived off the land. They
Mhm.
could just survive. Nowadays, like in this town, I mean, if the police stopped showing up, if the grocery stores stopped having food, and we're already seeing this where there's shortages of everything. Like during COVID, we saw that you couldn't get meat, you couldn't get toilet paper. These things happen. We don't have the community frameworks nowadays, and we don't have the cohesion to survive something like that. And I think that's really where we need. I think that's where we need to start. If the economy does collapse, you have to have a community.
I do have a general, like, and this is something I've been tossing around. You know, we talked about this being the topic for this episode. This is something I've been talking to people about and throwing around in my head. Is I think that the concept that most Americans have of like collapse is very misguided.
Yeah.
I think that, like, if you look throughout history, you know, you mentioned the Great Depression. That's a great example. You very rarely see total collapse. And with the heightened, you know, technological connection that we see in modern America, I don't think that there will be a prolonged period of total collapse. Like, you know,
it's not The Walking Dead.
It's not The Walking Dead. It's not Fallout New Vegas. You know, you're not going to have this just total, just like apocalyptic scenario. But I think there will be, if something like this were to happen, there will be like a short-term period of like relative chaos.
Food shortages. Like the power of the federal government will be weakened because if people can't eat, people can't go to work.
General infrastructural decline because you know, if these federal institutions that, you know, are supposed to, and they haven't been doing a great job of it, but if they're supposed, the ones that are supposed to maintain like power infrastructure, you know, the highway system, all of these things, if it just ceases, then you'll see,
for a short period of time.
Yeah, even for a short period of time, you know, you'll see just a general crumbling of these types of infrastructure.
A massive spike in crime, especially in large cities. Like I couldn't imagine like the lights going out and there being no food in a city like New York.
And that's where I think
that's terrifying.
Those
places like this will be generally almost the same.
It'll be like and that's where I get this shift of like between like the total apocalyptic version of collapse versus like a more conservative like decline. You know, you mentioned like a city like New York, you know, all of these very metropolitan, highly, you know, dense areas, you know, population dense areas, you know, if infrastructure, you know, fucks up for even a second there, it's going to be chaos. You know, you saw that early on in COVID.
Everything is heightened.
You're seeing that now with just general, like, nobody's scared of the police anymore. Nobody's afraid of like committing crimes. You know, you can get away with shoplifting. You can get away with murder in a lot of cases.
There's like mutual combatants laws where you can just fire guns in the street in Chicago because the cops don't want to have to stop it. And you think a place like that, when the cops are literally gone, is gonna just.
But that's where I don't know if like
we saw it in Portland.
I think federal institutions will definitely lose. Just like, you know, you're not gonna have if the government crumbles, you're not gonna have these federal institutions being able to exercise authority over the entire country. But local institutions, like local police forces, those are different animals. You know, they get a lot of money from like the federal government, but for the most part, they have the equipment and the manpower necessary to maintain some kind of presence. But without
depending on the place,
that's true. And without a federal oversight, though, their ability to maintain, you know, law and order
system,
whatever whatever it ends up being, because it's going to be different from place to place, you know, like, you know, a country like a county in rural California is going to be very different than a county in rural North Carolina. It's going to, just because if it's a more localized form of power, the people that are comprising that local power are going to be
much more different.
You know. And the same with like, you know, New York, you know, the police in New York will probably retain some kind of authority, you know, just infrastructurally. They have guns and uniforms and men.
And that lasts, but if people aren't eating, how long can that last, you know?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people think more about like, oh, well, I'm going to have to defend my house from raiders. I don't think that's very realistic. In some places, of course, that'll be an issue, especially when crime increases. You'll have to worry about that. I think a lot of people don't think about like food and water.
Yeah, that's going to be the primary concern.
Like if the water treatment plants stop running, because of the lack of infrastructure and because there's no money and because things collapse like that. Like,
you know, we were talking about the highway system. You stop maintaining the highways, how long can you maintain food transportation? What incentive do you have to maintain food transportation?
Yeah.
If there's no federal body like the highway patrol, you know, state troopers internally to a state, but if there's no federal body to ensure protection for a trucker going all the way across the country, you know, what's going to stop hungry people from setting up a little fucking flank and, you know,
just
getting
taking
what
it.
they need?
Or like, if the value of the dollar drops to an infinitesimal quantity,
mm-hmm.
how do we pay that rancher to export that to another state?
Mm-hmm.
Why would he do that if he's getting paid less than even the cow is even worth to him?
Yeah.
That doesn't make no sense. So,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, his local community will probably be fine, especially these like farming, agricultural communities. They'll be able to eat. But like we have these highway towns that like literally everything is brought to them from somewhere else.
Yeah.
They produce nothing. Like that's the places like that people need to think about. Like, what are you going to do when everything you have comes from somewhere far away?
Yeah. We have the benefit of a more agricultural, being a more agricultural center. But
and I think that's why the like people need to think about it. And people need to have communities, and you need to have a framework, and you need to have like a sort of plan, because this is something that does happen, and it's not even like this is not the last time this is going to happen. It's like, honestly, it's even in nature we see it. Like, forest fires happen.
Yeah.
Things need to be reset from time to time, and things just build up. And I think that in a way the framers had an idea of this. Like, I think they almost wrote it in.
Well, the Declaration of Independence has the clause, you know, they
knew it wasn't going to last forever.
Yeah, it says, you know, when a series of infringements upon people's rights is continual, those people have the right and almost the obligation to take matters into their own hand.
And I think when it really comes down to it, that's one thing conservatives do know, is like liberals or leftists or whatever we want to call them today, they're very loud and they're very angry and they like to make a big ruckus. But when it really comes down to it, and like you do need a boots on the ground grassroots effort, like that's not the people to look to. It is going to be the conservatives that have these frameworks, that have these things built up. It's going to be these values and these families and these people who value community and value like liberty that are actually going to keep. I mean, that's what happens, I think.
Yeah, like, absolutely. You know,
like progressivism doesn't work in economic collapse. Like, it just
that's, you know, when I was reading this it was a former Marine Corps officer talking about guerrilla warfare, and he was talking about like the history of guerrilla movements, and he mentioned like the liberalism that you're talking about, the kind of progressive idea, is always a product of like a very privileged middle class, whereas when people are hungry and people are starving and they need to get bread on their table, they don't care about, you know, these grandiose ideas, equality, you know, equity. They don't care about, you know, diversity, all of these like buzzwords that get, you know, trans rights, gay rights, women's rights.
Eating.
They care about eating. That's why you see like in the early stages of a lot of like partisan movements, a lot of, you know, movements focused around, you know, guerrilla warfare and creating a new state backed by the people, backed by the genuine like working population of a country. They're initially very authoritarian. They're initially very, you know, almost brutal, because they're concerned. I mean, think about the early Soviet Union. You know, there's a lot of criticism thrown at people like Stalin for having to crack down on dissent, having to crack down on, you know, hoarding food and having to institute these vast programs of collectivization. When, you know, you have people that are hungry, these grandiose ideas go out the window in favor of doing whatever you have to do to get food on people's plates.
If your hand disobeys you, cut it off.
Exactly.
You know, like, and I think that's something we've also lost nowadays. Like, and it's with this like lack of nationalism, is like, had we the chutzpah to just eliminate things, like you have, I mean, I hate to say it,
we're walking a very thin line.
not in that sense, but when like people
just to you know,
there are going to be sections of a functioning government that are just inherently wrong, and it is our duty to attack those things. Like,
the first step of being a conservative is being willing to say no. to something, you know, and that's something that like we've lost out on is there's the left.
They don't want to fight.
Yeah, the left that dominates this country has a very hard time just saying, no, this isn't our concern right now. We're worried about something that is more poignant.
Well, and in the opposite, one of my criticisms of the conservative movement is this lackadaisic like apathy, where they're just like they're like, yes, I believe in these things, whatever, but they're not like but like it's almost the same. The left, it's like, well, what am I gonna do about it, you know? And it's like
to say like we have to do something about it implies that I have to do something about it, and that's just a lot of work, you know.
It's like, you know, you're not a conservative then. I'm of the strong belief that if you're a conservative, you have strong values, and I believe it's based a lot on Judeo-Christian values, but you also have an obligation to your country. We all have an obligation to our country. And I think like if you're one of the people who just sit back and doesn't care what happens to your country, you're not my countryman. Like you are not.
Absolutely.
Like you're not a comrade. Yeah, even someone who disagrees with me, as long as they're trying, if their intention is to make the world, like the United States, better at the very least, you know, like at least we have the common idea of we're trying to improve things.
And then you can have a discussion like,
but if you don't even care,
yeah, I can't disagree with you on in any, like if I agree with like a goal, like you were talking about, like let's say we have different, I mean we do have different opinions about what needs to be done.
We agree that, but what needs to be, like what has happened.
Yeah, we have this idea of like something, we need to improve this place, we need to improve this country. Then we can argue, well, what's the best way to get there? But if I'm sitting across the table from someone who says we need to destroy this country, and I'm saying we need to improve this country, then there's no conversation to be had here.
No, there's not.
I have to piss.
Okay.
Arguing with people,
disagreeing
with people that hold fundamentally different values than you.
That's going back to what I talked about with there's no cohesion and there's no homogeneity in the United States. Like even on arguments like that, I feel very strongly about the abortion argument. Obviously, one of my things that I run into when I'm trying to argue with people is, obviously I think I'm right.
Yeah.
I feel like I know I'm right, but when someone doesn't value life, like there's like that's really what it gets down to. Because like we can argue about when life starts, like what kinds of abortions should be right on their side. Yeah, they could argue, but if they don't value the sanctity of life in general, you can't have the argument, because then you get to the point where they don't even care about the life of the child.
Yeah.
So there's no argument to be had, because we have a fundamental difference in what we believe, and that's when like there's no common goal.
Yeah.
We're not trying to preserve life. You're trying to make your life easier, and I'm trying to preserve life.
Yeah.
Like there's two different things. And like even with foreign policy, or if we get into any of these issues, if you just have a different fundamental like subjective reality from me, like there's no way we can agree.
Exactly.
We have no agreed upon standards. If we don't value life, we don't value, like the left doesn't value liberty. Like they don't believe that people should be able to do things just because that is their God-given right. Like they, with the free speech, like they don't care if we have free speech, and that's the whole, like now what are we agreeing? Like we're not disagreeing. We can't have
an argument about it. We can't have a fruitful discussion about it.
Yeah.
And then at the highest levels of politics, it's like the things that people disagree about are so almost superfluous compared to the things that they actually, when you have a system where you fluctuate between a Democratic president or a Democrat president. I don't want to say Democratic because I feel like that's being too generous.
Yeah.
But a Democrat president and a Republican president and a Democrat president and a Republican president, for the past 100 years, and the same trajectory seems to be present. The same movement, regardless of who's in charge, seems to be
it's
present.
Like it's a linear path.
Yeah. It's like, well, obviously these two people agree on something, and what they are arguing about is mostly superfluous. It's the debt situation that's going on right now is a perfect example of that, where like you have Republicans and Democrats, they can't agree on how to handle this debt situation. They can't agree on like, and it's just appalling to me that anybody believes that, I can't even fathom the number because I'm not a math guy, but trillions of dollars of money that we owe to foreign countries can be mitigated in any way by people sitting down and arguing
or that it just doesn't have to be paid.
Like, yeah, it's like you both agree that this isn't real, that this isn't something that actually has to be paid off, and that foreign countries have no right. You know, the people that we owe this money to have no right to just say, hey, where the fuck is my money? You know, you're not going to pay it off. You can't. There's no way you can do that in any short period of time. You both agree that this is pointless. That this is like a nominal issue. And you think something is going to be resolved by how you disagree about it. Like it's such a fundamental contradiction in the way that we interact with the rest of the world that I don't understand how people can buy into this. Like, oh, you know, the Republicans really got it in the bag. You know, they know how to handle this shit.
Mental gymnastics.
Yeah.
To believe that that's the way anything works. Mm-hmm. And I think that we are at a time in America where there are literally two different, not beliefs about the same thing, mm-hmm. two different worldviews.
Yeah.
And that is not concisive for anything. It's like, what do they say? A house divided is what? Like, I forgot the entire phrase, but we are a house divided at this mm-hmm. point. Not along even political lines, along like
just ways of being.
Like,
yeah.
Like, I like to say, like, with the modern LGBTQ movement, like it's almost like the pagan idea, like the separation of all these things, mm-hmm. where like nothing has any meaning anymore. So like we can't even define what we're arguing about. Like when you're arguing with someone like that, and like the acceptance, like that there is no, like there is, even if you want to call it the universe, the creator or whatever, mm-hmm. we can't agree on like rights and what is right and wrong without understanding that there is right and wrong. Yeah. Like when you defeat the idea of right and wrong, we can't do anything anymore.
And that's where that divide that you're talking about, it's a fundamental. There's a fundamental distinction between the two sides, in that one of the sides is like what we were talking about earlier. One side is concerned about living in a decent society. They want, you know, though I want to be generous because I believe the majority of conservative like people are on this side. They're concerned about the things that make a good society, and they want to preserve them. Mm-hmm. And then you have an opposing side that isn't concerned about any of that. Is concerned about ensuring the profits of multinational corporations. And that's where I have to be less generous with conservatives, especially conservatives in positions of power. You know, the Donald Trump rhino thing, you know, Republican in name only, is very applicable. It is a very real analysis of like the divide between a Republican and a Republican in name only, in that at the upper echelons of the political system in this country, you have people who are nominally on the side of conservatism, but indeed are doing the exact same things as Democrats.
They're using the social issues that they proclaim to mm-hmm. enact the exact same like economic strategies as the Democratic Party.
DeSantis.
But we see that a lot. And I think that's like one thing that like a lot of us like we're so caught up, and I get caught up into it too. A lot of these social issues, you know what I mean, like the transgender movement, things like that. At the end of the day, we're worried about that when we have trillions of dollars in debt. We're giving billions of dollars to other countries. Mm-hmm. We have people in our country that can't pay their bills. You know,
we're picking fights with global superpowers. You know, that's one of the things. You know, DeSantis did his whole fucking.
We don't even know if a man is a man in our country.
Exactly. And then you have people that like know, like, you know, I want credit because I say I know what a woman is and I know what a man is. But then you have people like Ron DeSantis who criticize the Democratic Party for their handling of the war in Ukraine right now, and criticize, you know, our funneling of guns, money, and support to the Ukrainian government, and then turn around and say, no, but we should just do that to Taiwan in China. It's like, so you want to avert a potential global catastrophe, a potential nuclear war with one country, just so you can do it to another country. You want to do the exact same thing to another country. How, like, where's the line drawn for you?
Yeah,
it's like
they get past the issues that are actually like important. Like even with the immigration issue, like obviously I think we need a lot of immigration reform in this country. Mm-hmm. But like I heard it was I believe it was a state senator from New York was talking about how they were like, send us all of the immigrants. She was like, we have all of these service jobs. We need people to be janitors. We need people to be line cooks. We need people to be these things. And it's like when you're looking at a place like that that has such a high like unemployment rate and homeless rate, and you're talking about like bringing people in also to work jobs that are not producing anything for your state. It's like you're getting past like the actual like issues themselves, and you're trying to use this like this high ground mentality where like let me be morally right, but actually do something that's going to negatively benefit the country as a whole. And like they're running on these ideas that like they sound great in theory, and they're using the right words, but like and conservatives do it too. We live in the theoretical, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's the problem with a lot of Republicans that didn't like Trump was they live in this theoretical world where we want this like ideologically perfect ruler, and it's like, but you're not looking at the actual like there's no plan
Exactly.
to fix anything.
And that's one of the things that I think Trump is fundamentally different with him. Did you see his quantum leap forward thing?
No, but I would love to hear about it.
It's amazing. It's amazing. He put out this document that was about how he like in 20 years he wants to have flying cars in this country. It's just the most like when you're accustomed to American politics, it's the most schizo shit ever. Because you would never hear a normal American politician be like, yeah, you know what? What is my main concern? Reindustrializing this country and building flying fucking cars.
It's like something to move forward.
But that's what I mean. It's a plan. It's something we can work towards doing rather than just, I'm gonna set up these laws that are gonna be repealed by the next guy.
Or it's like we disagree with Putin and Russia, or we disagree with the CCP. So let's just piss off two world superpowers as much as we can when we actually have no international leverage.
Yeah.
And then they hate Trump for speaking with these people and trying to form some sort, like you said, he almost brought peace to Korea.
Yeah.
Like he for the first time in what 50 or 60 years they sat down and like spoke to each other and like
people, just like
and he's hated. He's conspiring with the North Koreans. No, he's not conspiring with the North Koreans.
Being a politician.
If anything, he still has a semi-aggressive stance on North Korea. He just says you guys need to figure this shit out because we need to actually solve something. Let's do something while we're here. Let's not just sit around and keep pondering about these things. Yes, we're gonna appeal Roe v. Wade, and then they're gonna pass state laws, and they're gonna do. It's just, you know what I mean? Like we're in debt. Our people are like the middle class is effectively almost gone in the United States. Like we have people going to school for things that they're not even like doing. Like we have kids spending $100,000 to not get a job. Like you just like there's like so many other issues that are way more important in this country. We're trying to change our entire infrastructure to renewables, and
when we are sitting on oil fields and coal mines that are
largest supply of natural gas.
Yes, the world's largest supply of natural gas. One of the natural resources of North America are they're on par, if not greater than Russia, which is massive.
Yes.
It's
also
insane.
The ability, like our ability just to produce food, like like the amount of like fertile land we have in this country.
That was one of the big benefits that, when colonists set up shop in North Carolina. That was we were like the good dirt state.
Yeah,
it was just like you could just grow anything here,
and you can like stuff just grows.
Yeah,
but instead we plow these places and we build like Starbucks.
Or you have these massive agribusinesses that are growing soybeans so that you can ship them to China to be packaged and sold back to America. When in just 50 years ago, just a few decades ago, you grew cotton here and then you brought it to textile factories down the street, and then you could sell the cotton.
Instead of selling the cotton to China so they can make textiles to sell it back.
To sell to you.
And now we've lost all of the money we would have brought into the country by now buying this marked up thing. And the money is still technically, I guess, in the United States in a lot of ways, because a lot of these corporations, like they have places in China so that they can make the money, but the money's not coming to America.
It's just funneling upward into these like, and like we talked about before, this like kind of transnational, ruling class, this kind of transnational,
like the Atlantic
cabal, if you will.
I mean, but it's and I don't think it's even a tax issue as far as like with like these corporate class, because we do have one of the most progressive tax rates in the world.
Yeah.
Like I mean, when you make, I think it's when you make over like $100 million, you're paying essentially like almost 50% of your taxes if you're an American corporation. And I see this specifically, like I am like in the pharmaceutical like industry is what I would say, like chemical production, pharmaceutical production. All these companies are based in like Dublin.
Yeah.
Ireland has some of the best tax laws for corporate, but they're American companies that should be American companies.
They're run by Americans,
but we allow them to pay taxes or not pay taxes somewhere else instead of having to be an American company. Like you're benefiting off of the liberties afforded to you by the American government
because you have an office in some foreign country. That's technically the place that you're operating.
When you buy something from an American company, your money goes to Ireland and then back to America into these pockets. And it's like, but we do have it set up that way. And it's these are the things we're not talking about.
Yeah.
Why are we talking about, I don't know,
gays.
Bullshit. Gays. Yeah. Which is an issue, important issue. But if we have no social cohesion, we have no way to even combat these things. And I think a lot of these issues that we're seeing, like the LGBTQ movement, is this disenfranchisement from reality, like that people have. Like you said, if people have to work and like do things, like and they have jobs and they have like, if we have a community framework and you feel connected to your society, you want to be a benefit to the society. So therefore, you want to have children. Therefore, you want to get married. And if we incentivize those things,
you have less time to think about like, what if I'm a dog? It's like, exactly. What kind of a world do we live in?
Like, and those kind of people, they don't function well in a productive society, I don't think. Like in a productive society, and I think that like we could get to a point of like universal basic income eventually if everything is automated. But even in that point, like you still have to
get rid of the fucking. If you manage to automate everything in a society, what do you need income for?
Exactly.
You know.
But even at that point, you still have to provide something. Like I think like you can't just like we have these people that don't provide anything.
I
for the
think
country.
There's a myth of like total automation. I don't think that because the way I always think about it is, let's say you do successfully automate every aspect of production, even in just one given industry.
Yeah.
You need someone to maintain those machines.
And they can still be optimized. Everything can be optimized.
Yeah, but you know, you need someone to work on those machines when some shit fucks up.
Yeah.
And then let's say you build a machine to work on the machine. Well, who's going to work on that fucking machine?
Yeah.
You know, it's like you can't you're
never going to transhumanism. Like they're trying to like get rid of the need for a human.
But then like let's say you make the singularity, it's the Matrix, everybody's hooked up in the pods. Well, how the fuck do you, like, what if a tube breaks, dude? Like, it's like, everybody's hooked up in the fucking pod, so there's nobody can get out and fix it.
Or, like, I mean, even we saw this in like, entire electrical grid just goes down.
Yeah.
Who fixes that?
Exactly.
And we don't know, people don't know
Lightning
how to do
strikes just a transformer, and it's like, oh, well, we hooked everybody up to the pod, so, you know.
There's this growing sentiment in the United States that people not only don't want to work, but if they do want to work, they don't want to do something hard. I spoke to someone the other day about manufacturing, and that like I view manufacturing like that's an area that I love. That's what I like to do. And I was like, we need to bring industry back to the United States. We need to bring manufacturing here. We need to make things. And he was like, why would I want to do that? That job would suck. And it's like, so yes, you're working a job where you produce nothing. You're getting paid like basically more than what you're producing. You're not producing anything, and you're taking all these government benefits. And like we aren't, like people don't want to do hard things, but they want to complain that things suck.
It's like people criticize Pol Pot, right, for taking all the guys that wore glasses and worked in the cities and did, you know, stupid university jobs and arresting them and making them work in fields. But they aren't going to do it willingly, and they need to.
I think the university system is one of the worst things that we've produced.
It's such a cyclical thing where it's like there are so many degrees where the only thing you can do with the degree is teach other people getting the degree.
It's almost like it's a pyramid scheme. Like it's like buy my product so you can sell it to other people, so they can sell it to other people, so they can sell it. Like what did Putin say? America is just a bunch of people selling cheeseburgers to each other.
Yeah.
Like
I love him.
Like he says things like that, but it's true when you think about it.
Empire of Lies was one of the best ones.
Yes. Like it's like we don't do anything. We just trade the same shit back and forth to each other, and we don't produce anything.
Like, while gradually like sending our currency to, you know, it's just an upward, you know, transference of currency to the highest echelons of society.
The guys who actually do make things, like the linemen and the plumbers and the electricians and the manufacturing industries and things like that, and like the farmers and the miners, the coal miners, are just vilified in the media
Yeah.
When they're the only ones actually bringing anything
we
into
brought
this
that
country.
up on the last episode where it's like a rural working class person is a bigot in the American consciousness now. It's like you're a reactionary, you're a bigot, for what? Because they're proud of what they are and what they do.
Because they don't want to sit around and paint watercolors and smoke weed all day.
Exactly.
And there's a growing thing where it's like people think they have the entitlement to not have to work.
Mm-hmm.
You can reap the benefits of our society, of this republic we've created, but not do anything for the republic. Like, that's such an asinine thing. And like you said, when things collapse, there is no room for that.
Yeah.
And
those people are gonna get arrested and get sent to the field,
eliminated or sent. And it's like, if you don't like, and that's we don't have that, and we don't teach that anymore. Like, we're taught that you should not. When in high school, were you ever given the option of maybe? Have you thought about being a plumber? Have you thought about being a craftsman? Have you thought about?
One of the funny things in our civics class, did you guys have to do the where it's like a week-long game thing where they like give you a job and you make X amount of money and you have X amount of dependents.
Yeah.
And like how much
it's like a budgeting thing.
Yeah, it's like a budgeting lesson. I remember I didn't do my homework that day, and they were like, if you don't do your fucking homework, you're gonna get like bottom of the barrel jobs. And I got plumber, and it was like, oh, you're a plumber. It was even in high school, you're teaching that the actual people that allow our society to function are the scum of the earth.
That build the society.
Yeah.
Like, that literally keep your water running in your house.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you have electricity so you can watercolor and smoke weed all day and watch Netflix. And that's like a growing thing nowadays. Like, and I think like people don't understand that with the gender pay gap.
Mm-hmm.
Like, men do these jobs that obviously no one wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're down in the sewers doing things. Men are up under houses putting in like insulation and like building houses from the ground up. It's hard labor. Like, I've done it. I've worked framing jobs.
Yeah.
That's why they make more. And those people should make more.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, like, we have this new thing. It's called NIH. I think it's NI something, where college athletes are now getting paid.
Yeah, I heard about that.
We have college athletes making like millions of dollars to throw a ball around. And then we vilify a kid who wants to be a welder.
Mm-hmm.
And they make good money, but they should be making most of the money. Like, if you're producing most.
It's not even that, like, I think most people that work those jobs get paid enough. Like, it's not about giving them
other
more
people
money.
Get paid too
it's
much.
that we need to funnel people into jobs like this rather than like, oh, yeah, you should get a gender studies degree. That's a good idea.
So you can teach other people gender studies.
That's a good, use of your time rather than like.
And these tax dollars go to just build these programs that are teaching people how to just need more money from the federal government.
Expand these programs.
It makes no sense. It's just like the homeless issue in California. There's a guy, Colion Noor. He's a Second Amendment advocate. He's a lawyer in Texas, and he did a whole thing on the homeless issue in Los Angeles particularly. Every year, markedly, the amount of homeless people increases in Los Angeles, and every year the amount of money given to their like whatever their state body is that targets homelessness is increased. Like, I think it was like they're given now, it's like something like $1.8 billion for that city to combat homelessness, but the homelessness thing is increasing. Like, we create these systems where it's bureaucracy, and that's what the universities have become, where it's like the only incentive they have is to create more jobs and to need more money. It's like they have an incentive to not fix these things.
It's the same with like the medical industry, where it's like, with all the time and resources we have at our disposal, surely we could find a cure for cancer. Surely we could cure some of these incurable diseases that are currently just being treated with like a variety of drugs and therapies. But the economic incentive to do that isn't there, because if you cure something, you don't get to treat it anymore. You don't you don't get a constant revenue stream every time someone gets sick. Every time someone gets cancer from smoking cigarettes, you don't get to, oh, well, we'll fix it.
Yeah.
You get, oh, well, now you're one of our, you're a cash cow for us the rest of your life, or you'll die.
They do that with orthopedic surgeries. I tore my MCL, and the doctors wanted to do surgery. Mm-hmm. I'm perfectly fine now. I can squat over my body weight. I can run. I can do things. But I think it's like a 50 to 60% chance if you have surgery on one knee, you're going to need surgery on the other knee within like 5 years because you're off of it. And they know these things. Like, they do these math. They do these equations. They know. It's like you're a lot of times insurance companies won't pay for treatments that aren't the highest end treatment, like surgery or something, which it's crazy. Like, I heard a guy talking about he owns a company called Ways to Well, also in Texas.
Okay.
And they do a lot of these holistic treatments that are like stem cells, things like that fix you.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he owned a pharmacy for a long time, and these pharmaceutical companies don't allow you to tell people about things like generic drugs. They are the same exact drug but cheaper. Like there's this whole system that's tied up in not helping people. Like it is, people don't really like a university is a profit. Like they're for profit for the most part. And pharmaceutical companies and doctors' offices, they're there for profit. And that incentive has, they like to say, incentivization and capitalism in those aspects, what increases ingenuity and like invention, and like to what extent though?
And then you have like a big university, like we have the perfect examples of, you know, a community college and a big university right next to each other. One of them getting way more money funneled into it at a time, and the other mostly subsisting off the state, but on a bit much smaller budget. One of them is where you go to get your fucking gender studies degree, and the other one is where you go to learn how to fucking weld.
They have an architectural department. You can learn welding. You can learn to be a mechanic. You can learn these specific things that actually help you. Even in the modern economy, I mean, they even have, like, you can get 2-year degrees in coding. You know what I mean? Things like that. And again, it's looked down upon. Like, I went to community college for my first 2 years, and I'm looked down upon in the university system. Oh, you didn't get the college experience. Because that's what college has become. College is an experience. College is not for you to be a strong member of society. Like, so many people leave college and they don't even want to get a job. So it's like, what did you go to college for? We're not training you to do anything. I think apprenticeships are like what we should bring back.
Yeah, because then you don't need this massive infrastructure to, you know, and that's something our society has lost just with like the bureaucratization of everything. It's like you can't, you know, I experienced it as a teenager. You can't just walk into somewhere and get a job unless you know somebody there.
You have this piece of paper.
Yeah, or you have like a piece of paper that says I'm qualified to do this job. But like, you know, you look even back at, you know, our parents' generation, not to mention before that, but like our parents' generation, that's how you got your first jobs. You just fucking walked in and
you shovel shit for a couple years.
Yeah, you're like, I'll sweep the floor and you'll pay me shit wages, and then eventually I'll be in the kitchen, or eventually I'm gonna stand here and watch you fix these cars, and eventually when you're fucking sick or tired or whatever, I'll help you. And then, you know, it's a natural development, an apprenticeship.
You have a respect for those under you because they've come from where you've come from.
Exactly.
And it's like it's a joke even in the education system. Like in my degree, my professors always would be like, yeah, well, I'd say, what of this am I going to use in industry? And I'd say, not much of it. They're going to teach you everything you need to know when you get there.
So why am I here?
It's literally to pay to play.
Yeah.
Like, you can't, like, I could go to a lot of these, like, manufacturing centers, and within, like, 1 year, 6 months, could be working the job that I have to get a 4-year degree for.
And it's the same with it's the same with, like, you know, welding. Like, it's the same with any trade. You could learn way more, way faster, just by being in a shop.
And doing it.
And watching people do it, and then doing it yourself. Versus sitting through classes and getting your 2-year degree, you know, your trade certificate, your 4-year, so, you know, like, but instead of doing any of this, just sitting in, watching it be done, and then doing it.
When I worked construction, I wasn't in college. I learned how to frame a house. I learned how to put in insulation. I learned all the building codes by doing it with guys who know how to do it. And you learn, you learn how to cut at different angles, and you learn what sorts of materials need to be used for things, and you know how long it takes to do certain jobs. Like, you can then look at a house and learn how to build it from the ground up. And I knew guys that were coming on the site with us out of their 2-year construction management degree, and they don't know how to do anything. They have no calluses on their hands. And I'm 2 years in, and I can run the whole job site.
Exactly.
Like, I could literally, like, do their job and tell people how to do their job. And I don't understand. You get into industry now, and then they want you to have 2 years of experience. Like, a lot of places, you have to have 2 years of experience before you can go in. You can't even how do you get 2 years of experience?
Yeah, like, exactly. And then you have these, like, institutional incentivizations. You know, you go through the 2-year program, and without actually interacting with the industry at all. And then you get in at a higher position, like you said, like he gets hired on as a manager. Yeah. And it's like, you don't know the job. And then also you're getting hired on as in a role that is one of the main things that's threatened by automation. You know, these managerial jobs are the first things that are going to go.
Yeah.
You know, we already see it with like the kind of
gig, top down. It's not going to be bottom up.
That we already see with like the gig economy, where it's like you don't really need a boss to make money anymore. You know, you don't need a boss. Like Uber is a great example, where it's like you have this, you know, you have this infrastructure, you have this program that is effectively your manager, but it's not a human being. I mean, obviously you still have the funneling up of money to the corporation that owns that infrastructure.
But they don't actually manage you.
Yeah, but they don't manage you. You are effectively your own boss.
And it's like, even in the education system, we're getting to the point where the role of the teacher is almost gone. You know, like we have kids in elementary school nowadays that they spend 80% of their time looking at a computer screen
or tablet or fucking, you know, it was even like that when we went through, where it was like, you know, how
what
often
they call it, the flipped classroom.
Yeah, how often was it just like, here are the laptops today, you know,
this is the assignment you're going to be doing. I'll be at the back of the classroom at my desk if you need me.
Yeah,
I think,
why are you here?
I think that a lot of the problems with the education system is that we're teaching kids to like, we're trying to teach these very specific things, but a very broad range of very specific things.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really help kids. Like we have kids learning calculus, we have kids learning genetics in school, things like that. Important things for a society, for some people in a society to know. Like, but that's not what education was built as originally. Like, people don't understand what classical education means. Classical education was you read the great works.
You learn how to think.
You learn how to think. And then you can apply it to anything.
Yeah.
If you read Aristotle, you read Plato, you read Locke, you read Hobbes, you read the Iliad and the Odyssey, you read the Bible, you read the great texts, and you learn how people think and how the world works. There's too many people that can do things but can't think.
Yeah.
And they're horrible at doing things because they can't think about them. Like once you learn, Musashi Yasumoto, who was a famous swordsman in ancient Japan, and he talked about, he would do calligraphy.
Yeah.
He killed, I think it was like something like 300 men, and he never was touched by a blade. Crazy.
Okay.
But he would do calligraphy, and he would write haikus and poetry. He said once he understood swordsmanship, he could apply it to anything.
Yeah.
Because he understood how to learn things and how to do things. And that there's a process. It's the same process for everything you learn, whether it be, I mean, it's like exercising. Like you don't start out knowing how to exercise. You just like you understand that like if I continue at this thing and I continue to try to improve every day, I will be better at it. And you don't need someone to teach you how to do a job if you just do the job. Yeah. Like you go out and you learn by doing the job.
And then through that experience of like, I understand, like to use, you know, framing a house for an example.
Yeah.
You know, I understand how to frame a house. Well, from that, you know, understanding like the you know, building something from the ground up, understanding what goes into making something a functional building, you can apply that to other things just because it's you have a holistic, like, I know how to do one thing start to finish, and I've learned it organically. You know, I've learned it through interacting with it. So now if I go out to learn something else, I can apply my prior knowledge of, oh, how did I learn that?
How did I understand why you don't know things?
Yeah.
And that you can learn things.
Versus I went to school to learn how to do this very specific program, and now I sit in an office and I do that very specific program. And if you ask me to step outside of that bubble and to actually think about what I'm doing for more than 5 seconds, I'm going to freak out.
That was the idea of the Renaissance man. It was like he just knew things, and he could do. It's like a what is it? A jack of all trades and a master of none is always better than a master of one.
Yeah,
because like, and we've created a lot of masters of one. We have guys who have a PhD in gender studies, but like, what can he really do if you put him in the wild and you need him to help you build a society? Like, and I think that's why we don't have an understanding of politics in this country. Most people, and I want to argue with people, and I love to argue with people, but a lot of times it's not fruitful because they don't even understand the basic premises of my argument.
Yeah.
Which are the basic premises of Western society, of society as a whole.
Just logic in general.
Logic.
As well. Like,
if you try to apply logic in an argument, especially with leftists, they'll be like, well, you're just like trying to like outwit me. And it's like, no, I'm proving you wrong is what I'm doing. Like, logic is applicable to everything. They also, just another tangent real quick. The idea that you can't extrapolate one principle and apply it to another situation is asinine.
Well, okay, I've been wanting to talk about this too. Is like the leftist and the liberal mentality is one of like compartmentalization.
Yes.
Where it's like one sphere does not interact with another sphere of
thought. They can have completely different ideas.
Yes, you can have contradictory logic in two spheres of thought within your own consciousness. Versus like a holistic understanding where you recognize everything is connected basic understanding of logic applies to all forms of thought. All
Because that's
forms
the only
that can be
true
taken.
logic.
Exactly.
It's the only true logic.
And if you prove that logic wrong, if you poke a hole in it in a legitimate way that actually is consistent with reality, then my whole understanding changes. Whereas you can have an argument with a leftist about like abortion, or
they'll tell you in one argument that life is essential and life should be protected, and then in this argument they'll change that.
Exactly.
And it's like your logic isn't seamless.
Mm-hmm.
My logic, that's why I feel like comfortable arguing with anyone.
Yeah.
Because if your logic is sound, you can argue anything.
Yeah.
Because if your logic works, it should work with everything. And like, it's like, what is it? The simple joy of being right. You can't, like, if you just right, you can argue with anyone.
And to bring this around to the topic of discussion,
yes,
you have this compartmentalization of things where it's like there is no understanding of a cohesive worldview, and in the form of an argument, that takes the form of, okay, you make this assertion, but your logic is flawed. I can poke a hole in your logic, and the assertion falls. In the terms of society, you have this state structure wherein it is premised upon falsehood. It's premised. It has a nonsensical base. It has no base if we're talking about economics. If we're talking about legitimate,
power, bubble gum.
Yeah, power derived from actual society. It has nothing going for it. And once anything happens, once any kind of crisis occurs, you're going to see either it flipping on its head and having to just completely throw out all of its concepts and turn into something else, or just a total collapse and replacement.
Because there's nothing holding it together.
Exactly.
It's like that was the idea of these. I mean, in a way, like these Judeo-Christian values to go. I mean, I bring it up, but it is the fundamental understanding of Western society. Like, we can't have laws if we don't understand what it means to be a person and what logic is, and establish like right and wrong. Like, a lot of people, I like to say, like, people have this understanding of God as just the man in the sky.
Yeah.
And I'll talk with people who are atheists, and just coincidentally they tend to be leftists. But if you bring up, like, I'll ask them, like, is it like, and there's a common thing. I think it's Michael Knowles who says it a lot, or actually I think it's Matt Walsh. But he says, is it better for me to bake a pie for a widow or to kick a baby in the face? And they'll say it's better to bake a pie for the widow. And he says, why is that? And they'll say, because that's right. It's the right thing to do. He said, well, what defines what is the right thing to do? And they try to do some mental gymnastics, and it's like, we have this understanding of right and wrong, and that right and wrong is established in something above humanity. Like we have this abstraction we have built. Even if you don't call it God, that's just a transcendental idea that it's beyond humanity. It's beyond ideas are in the spiritual. Yeah. Even language. Yeah. This is not language. Is metaphysical. Language is something outside of ourselves that we've created. That has no, like, you can't hold on to, like, justice. You can't hold liberty in your hand. You can't hold love in your hand. And like.
But right, all of these concepts reflect like we said, a transcendental concept.
Exactly.
Not,
and this hypermaterialism just defeats that. And I'm like, you can't, like, when you defeat the idea that there is something above us and there's something that connects all of us, you, like, there is no right and wrong. Like, you can't believe in right and wrong and not believe, like, in logic. Like, that's how we define right and wrong, is by like God, like the logos. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the word, the everything. Like, and we can't agree on that anymore. And I think that even countries like China, who might not even be, like, they're not a Christian country,
not even overtly religious,
but they have this abstraction that they believe in, that you do for China.
The people,
right? The people, the idea, like the thing they're going towards is common, and in Russia it's common. And people say, well, like, oh, well, they're mean to gay people, and it's like, that's what they believe.
Yeah,
they have this abstraction, they have this truth that they're following. And that's why they're doing well. And that's why countries, in the beginning, America.
Iran is another good example, where it's like, you have a very fundamentalist country, but it's interacting with modern. It's not fundamentalist in like the early 2000s conceptions of Afghanistan, where it's like, oh, these people are tribal, they're living in the past.
They're not Amish.
They're fundamentalists who have the most powerful thing. They are a fundamentalist people who hold a modern industrial nation in their hands, and their structure is not bubblegum and toothpicks. No,
they're building off of stone.
Yeah,
they're building off of things that are immutable. Right and wrong is immutable. Like, the idea of liberty is immutable. God-given rights, like, you can't, like, it, like, if you take away that foundation, You can't build anything on it. Like, you have to start with right and wrong. You have to start with right and wrong. That's what a nation is built on.
And that's why, like, one of the criticisms that people levy against communist countries is like they're godless. And I think that applies to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union, its original sin, I think, was the attack on the Orthodox Church. It's inarguable that this attack happened. It is arguable the degree to which it happened, but it certainly occurred where, you know, the Christianity was persecuted.
And I think that was a misunderstanding in a way.
It was a mistake. It was a mistake of the Soviet government, where they said, you know, they made the correct assumption, they made the correct understanding, the correct analysis of, oh, this church system has ties to the old order that we're overthrowing, but they didn't cope with it in a way that was, you know, they didn't say, okay, well, let's bring it into our system and make it something that we can work together on because it's not going to go away. They said, well, let's try to make it go away. Whereas I think the Chinese, and I think it has a lot to do with religion in China never really taking an institutional form in the way that it did in the West. The Chinese communists fully integrated Chinese philosophical and religious history into them. There was a temporary, you know, with the Cultural Revolution, there was an attack on these things, but it was a Nietzschean thing. It was a, you know, strike it with the hammer and see what is hollow and what is solid. You know, it's like, boom, okay, yeah, foot binding, let's throw that shit out. Boom, Confucian ideas about, you know, social cohesion and what makes a good society. That's solid. We'll keep, you know, we keep that. Whereas the Soviets kind of just took a nuclear attack on the church and said, you know, no, we're all atheists now, and that's unsustainable.
It's unsustainable, and it doesn't have to be Christianity, because I think that, like, God shows himself in different ways to different societies.
Well, that's why we mention Iran too. It's like they're obviously not a Christian country, but they're a strong country.
But what me as a conservative and an Iranian man can agree on is there is a higher good.
Yes.
There is a higher ideal to, and a Chinese man, there is something outside of himself that he is searching towards.
Yes.
I had this conversation with a girl the other day that we were talking about. I was talking about, I value in a wife more a good mother and then someone I'm going to be really good friends with. You know what I mean? Like, the more important of the two, I can be really good friends with someone, but if they're not going to be a good mother,
then you don't want to be in.
But if someone's going to be a great wife and mother, I can look past if we have some differences because we have the same goal.
Yeah.
And modern women and men can understand that like, the thing that's going to tie me and my wife together is that we want to create the same thing.
Yes.
Like, that's what gets you through. And in America, we want to argue about these petty differences, but we don't have that thing. We don't have that common goal.
You're not birthing the new, to use your analogy, you're not birthing the new society together. You're arguing about,
there's no ideal. And it's not even that they have a different ideal. If they had a different ideal, like, that's one thing. At least Satanists are like, our ideal is a horrible person. They have this ideal that they've cemented, and I can argue against that.
Yeah.
I can't argue against you if you have no ideal and you think that everything is just fleeting and atoms floating around in the universe, and, like, it's just that the only purpose for us being here is to be happy. Who the hell?
But even then, if you're a pure materialist, what is happiness? Why? Maybe my purpose is just to be a depressed motherfucker and hate my life.
Why is the widow with the pie happier than the kid getting kicked in the face?
Yeah, exactly.
Because something right was done. And it's like you try to argue and they'll position themselves around this circle that's really the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, it comes back. Like, you can't. I don't know. And maybe we're getting a bit abstract here, but I agree with you. I think that it's the compartmentalization and, like, the deconstruction of the goal. Because, like, we are a goal. Like, that's the whole idea of this was, I mean, the city on a hill. Like, we wanted to create the best society ever, and we have to have an ideal to create that.
Exactly.
And I mean, people want to talk about Locke and Hobbes and all of these guys and Rousseau, but I mean, the Bible is quoted more in the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence than anything.
Yeah.
They put Leviticus, a quote from Leviticus, on the Liberty Bell. If that doesn't tell you, and
there's a transcendental idea, you know.
And like, a lot of the founding fathers, like, people want to quote, well, they weren't an outspoken Christian. Yes,
but they believed in God. You know, it's like
people will say
we're talking about Iran,
under God, one nation under God.
Yeah.
It doesn't work if it's not under God.
Yeah, and we were talking about Iran. It's like, they're not Christian. I'm not going to make the case that, like, oh, it's a particular form that has to be
No.
taken. It's just a general transcendental idea. So you want to criticize the founding fathers, or you want to use that as evidence to like, oh, we're not a religious nation. We have no transcendental idea baked into our foundation. It's like, no, we do. It's just not an overtly Christian one.
Because it's allowed for if a Muslim person wants to come here. That's why I have more in common with the common Muslim than somebody who grew up right down the road from me. Like
one of the reasons for that also was that there were like in the initial settlement of the United States, there were Jewish people. Like those were some of the first people.
They were probably Anglicans. They were Protestants. They were different kinds of
Protestants. And you look at, how much can you blame them when you look back at, Europeans used to consider, in our modern world, you look at a Protestant and a Catholic and you're like, oh, you guys are Christians. But that's not how Europeans used to view that shit at all. They fought wars over that shit.
They're literally still divided over it.
Yeah, and you come over to America and say, you know what? That's not working, obviously.
You believe in the higher ideal.
Yeah.
And I think that in the United States, for the most part, that is Christianity just because of our cultural background. Yeah. But
it's like how in Iran, Iran doesn't persecute its Christian minority.
Yeah.
But it is a Muslim country.
They would rather you be Christian than
an atheist, yeah,
than a hedonist or a heretic. And like they didn't put one nation under Jesus.
No,
like God. And people would like have this idea that God is this like is just from the Bible. A lot of people also, a lot of like woke previous Christians don't understand like the connections between Islam and Judaism and like
even Confucianism, like any
even in these
traditional teaching.
Eastern cultures even understand the interconnectedness and the oneness of everything. Like that's the
they
idea.
Use different words to describe it though.
The same thing.
Yeah.
And they didn't have the guy. Like Jesus wasn't there, so it wasn't said in the same way. And like I mean it's even like like there's differences between Islam and Judaism and Christianity, obviously, but they are the same thing. Even in the East, like they have writings about like Jesus as well.
Yeah.
And that they recognize him. They recognize prophets, that God speaks through people.
It's a compartmentalization thing too. It's literally like there's a tree back there, right? If I say, I don't know, do you know the Spanish for tree?
I don't think so.
Let's say, well, I call that a tree, right? Somebody else calls it something else.
It's a big plant.
Yeah, somebody else calls it something else. The compartmentalist brain says, okay, these two people believe in fundamentally different things. Whereas someone with a holistic understanding recognizes they're talking about the same thing. If I say that tree is brown and it's got green leaves, and you say that big plant is brown and it's got green leaves, then we aren't talking about different things. We're talking about the same thing. It's the same with like the religions of the world, the traditional teachings of the world.
It's Elohim, Ella, and Allah.
Yeah.
Like literally in Aramaic, it's Ella is God.
Yeah.
Like we have the same word for the same God. Like and that's what the left essentially is doing in this country, is like destroying that cohesion and that understanding and destroying everything. And I think that is what's teetering us towards this economic collapse in a way, and also is going to cause us issues when it does happen.
Absolutely. It's like you're building a house, right? You have experience.
Yeah.
Do you build your house on one solid foundation? It's one unified, like just a giant slab of concrete, one unified thing. Not multiple, it is one piece. You build a house on that, or do you build a house on sand? It's all of these different things, all of these small, different, observable different things.
Yeah.
Which is your preferred foundation?
You build it on
for
a solid framework.
Yes. And we've built a house. We've built a house on solid concrete, and then we've systematically destroyed that concrete foundation
for the purpose of trying to build the house higher.
Yeah.
And it's like, why are we wrong? Why are conservatives viewed as wrong for just trying to preserve that thing? It's like, yes, there are going to be changes. There are always going to be changes. But there's things you can't change. And that's to go back onto the compartmentalization thing. Like, I think they have a lot of people, this postmodern thought in America, and this leftist thought is that, well, even if it's a natural law, I can change it. Yeah. And that's where you get wrong. And that's where people can't accept that things are going to be hard. They can't accept anything. Because anything that doesn't align with their worldview is wrong. And that's when you can't even have a political discourse. That's when you can't even decide on a topic if everything is malleable. There's nothing true. There's no truth. There's no stone. Everything it's the age of Aquarius.
Yes.
You can't even hold on to their ideology. You ask most people what they believe in the world, and they it's just some combination of words that mean nothing. Like
slogans.
Like we're here because of the universe, and I'm part of it, and I'm here to live out my truth. And what?
Exactly.
I don't know. All right, let's sum it up. The end is nigh.
The end is nigh.
But it's not the end. It's a
new beginning.
It's actually an opportunity, is what it is.
Yes.
And I think that's how it needs to be.
Like most catastrophic events, it is a chance for us to pull together what is real and what is necessary in our society and start fresh.
And I think as conservatives, it's our duty to like start working on that. Like what's going to be thereafter?
Yeah, exactly.
And what are we going to protect now?
And the first steps of that are just genuine community. If you live your whole life with all the right ideas, but you don't know your neighbor, then when you need him, he's not going to be there for you. But if you're, if we're, because like I said, we disagree. If you disagree about some stuff, but you know that there's someone there who, no matter what you think, he's your neighbor and he's going to do something if you need help.
Yes.
Then that's worth a million. That is a million times more valuable than being right all the time and not knowing the person that lives next to you.
Camaraderie.
Yes.
I think that's it. I think it's the community, man. That's the only. That's the art that will get us through. All right.